You've made it through the noise of the day. Now everything quiets. The world narrows into breath and stillness. This is the moment we wait for, not just to rest, but to remember. Tonight's story is not a fantasy. It is a thread woven through centuries, passed down in whispers and half-faded hymns. Aphrodite's Tears, the story of love lost. You may think you know her, goddess of beauty, draped in gold, rising from the sea. But the truth is older than her statues. Before she became an icon, she was a heart. This is the tale of a love hidden behind veils, forbidden by the very heavens that shaped her. A story of longing that crossed the threshold of divinity, touching a mortal soul. And when that love was denied, it did not vanish. It left a trace, not in fire, not in rage, but in something far more enduring, grief. Some say her tears still fall, disguised as rain over forgotten ruins. Others believe they hardened into pearls, scattered across oceans, waiting to be found by those who've known loss and learned to live with it. Tonight, as you listen, you may begin to feel the edges of that sorrow, soft like worn silk. Not to unsettle you, but to wrap around you gently, to let you know it's safe to feel. Because this story is not just about losing love. It's about what remains after. We welcome you to Whispers Before Sleep. If you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe to this space where stories are told not to distract, but to comfort. Let the rain carry you now. Let this story guide you to the place where memory becomes rest. But before we begin, ask yourself, what if a love so deep defied even the gods? Aphrodite. To the world, she was beauty incarnate. To the poets, a muse. To the seas, a daughter. To Olympus, a force. But long before marble caught her likeness and temples bore her name, there was something else. Something quieter. A longing, a loneliness even immortality could not quiet. Her story begins, as many ancient things do, on the island of Cyprus. The winds there spoke her name before men did. The olive groves, the salt-slick rocks, the endless horizon, each bore the mark of her presence. But the people who lived below her clouds had no idea how closely she watched them. Especially one. Thalos was not born into legend. He was born into dust, a mortal, a sculptor. Known in the fishing villages for shaping faces so lifelike, they seemed to breathe when the wind passed. His hands, cracked with marble dust, carried more reverence than the priests. People whispered that the goddess herself must guide his fingers. They didn't know how right they were. Each night, long after the kiln's last ember cooled, Thalos walked the cliff path to the edge of the sea. And there he prayed, not for fame, not for gold, but for understanding. For love he could not name. He prayed to her, and she listened. Not at first, but slowly, night after night, she heard something in his voice that no offering ever carried. Sincerity, hunger, devotion stripped of ceremony. And so she came, not as a vision, not as thunder or flame, but as breath, as thought, as presence. At first she appeared in dreams, then in silence, beside him in the dark, though he could not see her. Over time she revealed herself, not fully, just enough to blur the line between reality and reverence. Thalos never told a soul. Who would believe him? He barely believed himself, but each night the bond deepened. He carved less for coin, and more to remember her shape, the way her presence bent the air around him. He stopped asking for love. He started speaking to her as if she were already his. In Olympus, something shifted. The gods had seen flirtations between divinity and man before. They laughed at them, entertained them, until they didn't. until the lines blurred too much. Until gods forgot what they were, and Aphrodite was forgetting. Whispers began, not among mortals, but among immortals. Hera, ever watchful. Apollo, uneasy. Even Zeus, who looked kindly on many indulgences, grew quiet when her name was spoken alongside the sculptor's. Then came the decree. No more dreams. No more whispers. No more Thalos. The message was simple. Love him and lose Olympus. No threats. No chains. Just the truth. And here the story bends. Some say she obeyed, that she turned her face away and let his name slip from her memory. Others say she went to him one last time, cloaked in mortal form, to say goodbye. But there is another version, the one not written in scrolls or sung by the bards. The version kept secret among the oldest of the sea priests, whispered where waves touch sacred stone. In that telling, she made a choice. It wasn't duty. It wasn't love. It was something deeper. Something no god had chosen before. She chose to feel everything. On the night of the lunar eclipse, Thalos lit a fire atop the cliffs. He waited as he always did, sculpting by torchlight. But that night, the air changed. The stars vanished, one by one. The sea calmed as if listening, and far above, Olympus stilled. That was the night everything changed. After the night of the eclipse, the world did not return to what it had been. There are no scrolls that describe how a goddess and a mortal meet in secret. But something greater than scripture remembers. The trees that turned their leaves to shield them, the stones that held warmth longer than they should, the sea that quieted just enough for voices to be heard across its wind. Their meetings were never grand. There were no chariots or golden thrones. Only footsteps pressed into sand, still warm from the day. Only whispers exchanged beneath cypress trees that no longer bloomed for spring, but for something older. In these moments, Aphrodite forgot to be a goddess, and Thalos forgot to be afraid. She would speak of the constellations she once lit with her own hands. He would tell her of his childhood, of how he once tried to sculpt clouds with clay and ended up shaping birds. There was no need for gifts, no grand declarations, just presence, just time stolen from the stars. But behind her laughter lived something she never spoke aloud. The gods do not envy mortals for their weakness. They envy them for the beauty of choosing, for the risk that makes love real. Aphrodite had watched countless hearts collide and fall apart, but she had never felt what it meant to love without command. And now she did. The conflict was quiet at first, a hesitation in her breath, a delay in her goodbyes. She was not afraid of being punished. She had known wrath. What she feared was the end of this, that to be obedient meant to unmake this fragile thing she had only just begun to understand. Thalos, unaware of the decree that loomed over their love, began carving again. This time, it was not for the village, not for coin or praise. It was for her. A single block of white Parian marble, smuggled in from a distant isle. He worked through the night, shaping not the goddess as others saw her, but as she had appeared to him. Bare of symbols, stripped of ceremony. Just her. He worked in silence. Each curve, each hollow of stone carried a memory. The way she tilted her head when she listened. The way her fingers hovered before touching the earth, as if afraid she might harm it. The sculpture was unfinished, and yet it radiated something eternal. She never saw it. Something had shifted. Their moments, once timeless, began to shorten. The stars no longer lingered in the sky. The sea grew restless. Roses she once coaxed into bloom began to wither the moment she passed. The air, once thick with the scent of myrrh and honey, turned sharp. And there was the raven. It came first to Thalos's window. Black as night, with eyes that shimmered not gold but silver. He did not speak of it. Thought it a trick of fatigue. Then it returned. Again. And again. Always watching. Silent. Aphrodite knew what it meant. It was not a creature of omen. It was a reminder. Zeus had sent no thunder, no decree etched in stone. Just a bird. That was warning enough. Soon after, the sea began to whisper, not in words, but in sounds that mimicked her own voice, echoing back her promises, distorted. The waves had once welcomed her. Now they churned with knowledge. She waited for Zeus's voice, and it came, not in fury, but in finality. "You are the goddess of all hearts," he said. "You cannot give yours away." That was the price. To love a mortal was to strip herself of what she had been made to rule. She did not answer. Not at first. She went to the place where Thalos waited, hidden from sight, under the same fig tree where he had first said her name aloud. She did not speak of the ultimatum, did not tell him that the heavens had weighed their bond and found it unsanctioned. She only looked at him. And in his silence he understood that something was ending. But not that night. That night she promised something else. As rain began to fall, soft, steady, unannounced, she touched his hand and whispered words not meant for gods or men. What she said has never been written, but the sea still remembers. And it is said that under that rain, Aphrodite made one final promise. It began without warning. The day had opened gently, clear skies above the Aegean, wind quiet along the cliffs, the scent of laurel drifting through the air like a forgotten hymn. Thalos had promised to return before dusk. He never did. At first she waited. She told herself he had taken the long road from the quarry, where the marble ran deep and true. But the sun fell behind the hills, and the wind, once still, began to pull. Then the sky shifted. Clouds gathered without a center. Not heavy, not loud, just present, pressing down as if the world had been turned slightly inward. No gods spoke. No messengers arrived. But something had been taken. Aphrodite left Olympus. She did not descend in a chariot. There was no announcement, no ritual. She walked, barefoot, across fields that recoiled under her touch. Her form shimmered, barely held together, as if part of her was being unstitched with every step she took into the world below. She searched the coastline first, then the paths near the olive groves, where he had once carved her name into bark. The fig tree stood silent. The sea would not answer. Mortals saw a stranger that day. A woman in robes too fine for the earth, hair catching light that didn't match the hour. She did not speak to them. Could not. Her voice, shaped for love and laughter, was quiet now. There was no magic in her eyes, only questions the stars refused to answer. 3 nights passed. On the 4th, she found it. Hidden in the back of the studio Thalos had always kept locked. A chamber where he did his final works. The pieces too sacred to show, too personal to sell. The sculpture stood unfinished. Chiseled from a single block of white marble, it rose like a ghost, still tethered to the world, She recognized the shape, her jawline, the arc of her shoulders, the way he had carved her hands as if they held the weight of something unseen. But the eyes, he had left them hollow. Two empty spaces where sight should have lived. Not a mistake, not forgotten. It was as if he had tried to say something he could not bear to speak aloud. A message, perhaps, or a farewell. She touched the stone. It was cold, not from the air, but from absence. This was not just a carving. It was a question frozen in time. What is left when love is forbidden to live? She stepped outside. The wind had picked up. The sea was no longer quiet. No one had told her what had happened. No decree had named his fate. But the silence spoke more clearly than thunder. And so, she wept, not as a goddess, not as the celestial weaver of love and longing, but as someone who had, for the briefest moment, tasted what it meant to be known completely. Her sobs were quiet, but the rain began. Each tear that fell shimmered with the weight of her sorrow. And as they touched the ground, something unexpected occurred. They hardened. Not into stone, not into salt, but into pearls, iridescent, perfect, impossibly shaped from emotion itself. They scattered where they landed, caught in the folds of leaves, buried in the wet sand, carried by waves that remembered her grief long after the sky forgot her name. They came to be known, much later, as Aphrodite's tears. Found by fishermen tangled in nets, by lovers along shorelines, by widows who held them without knowing why. Each pearl held something more than beauty. It held memory. A kind of sadness shaped into something too lovely to forget. Even now, stories tell of these pearls. Some say they grant peace to the heartbroken. Others believe they cannot be kept. They vanish at sunrise if taken without understanding. But all agree on this. They are born not from the sea, but from loss. Aphrodite did not return to Olympus. Not fully. She withdrew, not in shame, but in mourning. The temples once lit in her name were left without flame. The flowers she had favored refused to bloom. Yet the rain, gentle, persistent, never stopped falling on the last place he had touched. Thalos' studio, abandoned now, stands without doors. Time eats away at the stone, but the sculpture remains, unfinished. And when it rains, there are those who say they've seen the figure shimmer, as though it waits. The sea never forgets. Its waves do not speak in words, yet sometimes, when the moon hangs low and the tide draws close, there are murmurs. A voice that is not quite sound, not quite silence. A whisper that brushes the edge of the wind like silk. Long after Aphrodite vanished from mortal sight, that voice remained. At first, only the seabirds heard it. Then the tide grew bold and left something behind. A single pearl, smaller than a fingernail, washed ashore beneath a sky without stars. Centuries later, Callista walked that same shore. She was not seeking anything. At least, that's what she told herself. A historian by title, but in truth she was only ever chasing what others had forgotten. A life spent inside parchment and dust, decoding lives that no longer answered back. Until that day, when her foot nudged something smooth and cold in the sand. She picked it up absently, wiping it clean. It shimmered, though the sky was gray. And something in her chest shifted, quiet but distinct, as if something long buried had stirred. That night she dreamed of rain falling inside a temple with no roof. A woman stood barefoot on marble, cloaked in hair the color of rose gold dusk. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and though her lips never moved, Callista heard her. Find him. The dream came again the next night, and the one after. Callista followed the whispers inland, drawn by nothing she could name. Locals directed her toward ruins, stones half swallowed by vines, a single column still standing like a question mark against the sky. No signs, no plaques, just time and neglect. But when she stepped between the crumbling threshold, the rain began. Soft at first, then steadier, like the rhythm of a forgotten lullaby. Inside the temple's remains, half buried beneath layers of soil and moss, Callista found them. Slabs of marble etched in an ancient tongue. She translated them slowly, over days, her hands trembling with each line. They were not inscriptions, not hymns, but something far more intimate. Letters. Written by a man named Talos, they were addressed not to a god or to history, but to one woman. He spoke of a love written in the bones of the earth, of dreams carved into stone, so she would never be forgotten. He spoke of eyes that saw through time, and promises made beneath falling rain. Callista's breath caught as the final letter ended. The handwriting had shifted, shakier, unfinished. I will wait. If not in life, then in the shape of what I leave behind. She stood then, guided by something older than knowledge. The statue at the temple's center had long since been eroded, but one thing remained. The outline of a face, delicately carved, and two hollow eyes. Callista, without understanding why, reached into her pocket. The pearl was still there. She placed it gently into one of the statue's eyes. At first, nothing. Then a sound. A low hum. The kind that lives beneath hearing. The kind you feel in your ribs before your ears catch up. The rain thickened. The sky darkened. And then the statue shivered. Just once. The remaining eye lit from within, soft gold, like lamplight seen through fog. Then both eyes glowed together, and in the space of a single breath, a figure stepped forward. Not entirely formed, not bound by time or matter, but she was there. Aphrodite. Her form shimmered like sea glass, and her gaze rested on Callista, not with surprise, but with recognition. And then she smiled, ensuring a break after each sentence. Love doesn't vanish. Not really. It shifts, changes shape, like water carving its path through stone, slow and patient. The shape of it may be different in the end, but it's never lost. Even when time erases all traces, love remains in ways we can't quite see, only feel. And maybe that's the point of this story. Not that love is something we lose, but that it's something we hold in a different way. In the way the moon holds the ocean's tides, unseen but felt deeply, endlessly. In the way rain is no longer just water, but the sound of an aching heart whispered through the leaves. The heart doesn't forget. Even after the soul has moved on, the heart carries the echo of what once was. And so, the story of Aphrodite and Talos is not a tragedy in the way we often think of loss. No, it's something different. A reflection of how deeply love once existed. How it can transcend boundaries and laws. Whether those boundaries are drawn by the gods themselves or by time itself. Aphrodite's tears are not just sorrow. They are an offering. A reminder that love doesn't just belong to the living. It belongs to all things. Every stone, every breath, every piece of art ever created in the name of something greater than ourselves. Love is a quiet rebellion, carving its shape into the earth, unspoken but undeniable. Grief, too, can become art. What was once a cry of pain transforms over time into something magnificent. It becomes a song, a sculpture, a moment of beauty that could only have come from a heart that has known true loss. The pain doesn't fade, it shapes something new, something that lives beyond the person who created it. In this way, loss can still hold beauty. For Thalos, it was a statue, a final expression of his love, carved into marble so that he would never be forgotten. A statue that, unknowingly, would become the symbol of a god's own sorrow. His grief transcended his own life, passed down into eternity, a testament to a love that refused to die. In every piece of art, every work of creation, you find the echoes of the heart that shaped it. The artist is never truly lost. They leave pieces of themselves scattered across the world in ways you might not expect, in the smell of rain, in the sound of waves, in the tenderness of a whispered promise. And just as Aphrodite's tears became pearls, so too can our own sorrow transform, given the right time. Grief, while difficult to bear, carries the seed of renewal. In time, the storm will pass, and what was once lost will begin to take shape again. Perhaps not in the way we expect, but in a way that helps us heal. Remember this, there is power in remembrance. We often fear forgetting. We fear that to let go of the grief means to erase the love that came before it. But the truth is, remembrance is not about holding on to pain. It's about honoring what was. It's about accepting that love, in all its forms, has a life of its own. It changes, yes, but it doesn't disappear. It waits quietly in the background of our lives, ready to be felt again when the moment is right. Aphrodite's gift, her offering of tears turned into pearls, serves as a reminder that grief and love are intertwined. They shape us, they change us, but they do not diminish us. They make us more deeply human, more deeply alive. And in this moment, as the rain continues to fall, remember that you are not alone in your loss. Even the gods have wept. Even they know what it means to love and to lose. They know what it is to mourn, to carry the weight of memory, and to find a way to heal despite it all. You are not alone. Every tear, every sigh, every moment of grief is a part of the same story. A story that begins with love and ends with peace. A story that will continue to echo through time. And like the rain that falls tonight, it will carry you forward softly, gently, and with the knowledge that healing, though it may take time, will always come. As the soft rain continues to fall, I invite you now to take a moment and reflect. The story we've shared tonight speaks of many things: love, grief, transformation, and the quiet peace that follows when we allow ourselves to heal. It reminds us that love never truly leaves us. It changes. It shifts form, it lingers in ways we might not always understand, but it always stays with us, in some shape, no matter the time or the distance. And grief, as painful as it may be, can give rise to something new. Something beautiful, like the pearls of Aphrodite's tears. Now, think for a moment. What pearl has your sorrow left behind? What piece of beauty, of strength has emerged from your own experiences of loss? The answers may not come quickly, but when they do, they will bring comfort, knowing that grief can be transformed into something precious. As you settle into your bed, I encourage you to share your thoughts, your reflections, or perhaps even your dreams in the comments below. We are all connected in this journey of healing, and your voice is part of that shared space. And now, as you drift off into sleep, may the rain soothe you, and may the tears of Aphrodite guard your dreams. Rest easy, knowing that in the quiet, the healing has already begun.